I'm leveraging the internets to finish up the introduction here.
Sans plus tarder, veuillez souhaiter chaleureusement la bienvenue à votre invité de ce matin, le diacre Gauthier Vincent.
All right, now in English. Without further ado, please extend a warm and welcome to your guests this morning, Deacon Gauthier Vincent.
Good morning, everyone. So Paul asked me to come back, right? I was here 3 years ago, I think. Good to see you. And Paul asked me to come back, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. And he said, don't give us a sermon. And I thought, it's too bad, that's what I do, right? I counted the years I must have preached, I think, 1,000 times. And that's what I like to do, but he said, no, don't give us a sermon. So I really didn't know what I would talk about. So I had to ask my king, what are we going to talk about? And so we had a few talks about that, and then I came up with the idea I'm going to talk about, it will be confessions in 3 phases of life. Confessions in 3 phases of life. And I want to use the word confession in the same way that Augustine in the 5th century, when he wrote his Confessions, what he meant by that. I don't want to confess my sins. That would be terribly boring, right? After 2 minutes, everybody would be gone, right? That's boring. I don't even want to talk about me because I've done nothing extraordinary, right? I have a very ordinary life. I remember one of your speakers a few years ago, the gentleman had built hospitals in Africa. I thought, that is cool. I have done nothing like that, no hospitals in Africa. So I've not done much at all with my life. So that's not what I want to talk about. But I want to talk about him. I want to talk about my king. I want to talk about his life in my life. I want to talk about his words in my life, because that is interesting. I think when you hear his words in my life, it's going to echo his words in your life. And as I was preparing for this morning, I went back with my memory through adulthood and childhood, and what struck me is how my king has always been talking to me. He's so talkative. I think he cannot shut up. He cannot stop talking. You just need to tune in. But there's one thing from all these years, I'm 58 now. The Lord is so talkative. So that's what I want to talk about, confessions. I will confess to the faith and to the word and to his words in my life. And I want to do it in 3 phases. So here I am borrowing from Ronald Rolheiser. I don't know if some of you know him, right? Ronald Rolheiser. He's a Catholic preacher, priest, author. Whenever you come across a book by this gentleman, read it, it's very good, right? Holy Longing, you might have heard of it. Sacred Fire. In Sacred Fire, he talks about life in 3 phases. So I'm going to borrow his framework to talk about 3 phases and do my confessions in 3 phases. And last, so I'm not preaching here. So I'm going to try to ignore you and just get into a conversation with my king. If you have read the Confessions, read Augustine Confessions, it's very striking. He does not address his readers. He does not care. He talks to his Lord on every page. And every page he starts by giving praise to his Lord, to the Lord of his life. That's the only thing that matters to him. So if I start whispering, our friend here will put the volume up, but it's because I'm talking to my king. So 3 phases of life. The first phase of life, Rolheiser calls it the struggle to pull our lives together. That's a very good title for this first phase of life, from 0 to 25. The struggle to pull your life together, because it is a struggle. And it is about defining who you are. What are your values? Whom are you going to serve? What kind of an adult do you want to be in the world? And when I think of those years from 0 to 25, I see that my King has always been whispering in my heart and always pulling me onto you. So I will mention just a few things. As far back as I can go in my memory, as a child, I remember my dad coming into the bedroom that I shared with my younger brother every night. He would sit on the floor between the two beds, and we would sing a hymn, and then he would read stories from the Bible. And then we would say our prayers, Our Father, Hail Mary, the Creed, Confiteor, and then we would go to bed every night, as far as I can go back. So the stories of the Bible are the first stories that my brother and I learned. I learned to be in the Word from a very young age. And I learned that I had this meeting with the Lord every night, that I had a standing invitation. And so I got into the habit of prayer at a very young age, and that never left me. Prayer has always been a refuge, place where I can be most myself, where I can be free, where I can just unload, be with my King, and then rest. And that never left me. So that was the beginning. He attracted me to him and taught me to pray and to find him in the Word and in prayer ever since I was that tall. And then something happened when I was 12 years old. He and I, we went on a retreat, on a weekend retreat, with friends of mine, with the chaplaincy of my school. And so I don't remember much from that weekend retreat, except this. It was outside Paris. It was a very warm weekend, probably late May. And on a Saturday afternoon, I found myself with my friends playing rugby. And it was super intense. It was in a clearing. There was a clearing in the wood. The grass was pretty tall, so it was hard to run. And we had so much fun running, and we were all sweating and having a tremendous time playing rugby. And then it was chapel time. So we ran to the little chapel on the edge of the wood, and we got into that place. The only thing I remember from that place is that there was so much light outside that getting into that chapel, it felt all dark. I could not see anything. And then it was so warm outside, we had run so much, that it felt very cool. The temperature was much lower in the chapel. And then as I entered that chapel, I was overwhelmed by this sense of being loved. It was, the silence was telling me, I am so fond of you. You are my preferred little one. And I answered, really? Really, you love me that much? But the silence said, you are the one I prefer. I'm so fond of you. And so through the years, I told every one of my children, you are the one I prefer. And they always answer, that's not possible. You just said that to my sister. Yeah, but you are the one I prefer. You are my beloved one. But you told my brother the same thing 5 minutes ago. Yes, but I'm right to tell every one of them, you are the one whom I prefer. And my kids don't know that I'm saying that because I heard that. And it never left me. Then you can go through life and through whatever. When you have heard the Lord say, you are my little one. In you I delight. And that never left me, right? That was the center of that phase of life, to pull your life together, to figure out who you are. And the Lord saying, who you are, this is who you are. You are my beloved little one. And that never left me. And then several years later, when I was a little older, by that time I was doing my night prayers on my own. The Lord one day had this idea. He said, well, why don't you read the gospel to me? So I got into the habit, when I was 15, 16, all these years. at night I would close the door of my bedroom and I would read the gospel to my Lord out loud. And then I would preach to the Lord. It's a weird thing. It's a weird thing. But for years, I preached the gospel to my King every night. And as I did that, he explained the gospel to me, and I explained it to him. And we had a great time. It was a time of freedom, a time of just being who I am with my King, and it was good every night. So that's what I say about this first phase of life, the struggle to pull your life together, and how the Lord was always in the middle of it, His Word and His words, and teaching me that I need, if I want to live, I need to meet with Him all the time in prayer. The second phase of life, Rolheiser calls it the struggle to give your life away. Of course, it's from the gospel, right? You must lose your life if you want to find it. But these are beautiful words. The struggle to give your life away. That's this active phase of life. When all of us, when we are running around, right? We work hard, we raise a family, we get involved in the community, in church, we run, right? That's the active phase of life. The struggle to give our lives away. And I was very, very fortunate that phase of life, 25 for me, started by the Lord and I jumping off the cliff with no safety net, in a split second giving my life away. And it was the high point of my entire life, in a split second to give my life away. So let me tell you how it happened. So by then, 25, I was working for the World Bank, so based in Washington, D.C. Actually, every 6 weeks, I was traveling to Africa. We were funding road infrastructure projects. I loved every minute of it. So I had the best job on the surface of the earth. I was a banker for the poor. It was fantastic. Fantastic. I loved every minute. When I was back in Washington, D.C., I was a little lonely. But when I was out there in Africa, it was the best thing in the world, right? Imagine attending Mass on a Sunday in Kigali, Rwanda. You understand nothing, but you know what's going on. It was the best job ever. And then on St. Patrick's, where is Michael, the Irish? So I have a devotion to St. Patrick. Because on St. Patrick's Day, 1992, I had just returned from Africa, so I was totally jet-lagged. And then a young lady showed up in my office. And she was beautiful, she was very young, she was all giggling, and I thought, great. And then she invited me to go out. So that night we went out to celebrate with the Irish crowd. And then things moved very quickly, and I was less than a gentleman, let me say that. And not a Christian man, really. So everything moved very quickly. And then several months later, I think in July, in the middle of the night, Valerie called me from France. She was in France for 2 weeks with her parents. It was the middle of the night, the phone rang. I came down to the kitchen of the house that I shared with three wonderful ladies. And there in the middle of the night, standing by the fridge, I'm holding the phone, and she says, I am pregnant. And I heard these words. I said these words. I said, you come home, and we will do good out of this. I did not miss a beat. I said, you come home, and we will do good out of this. And I knew the words were mine, and the words were not just mine. It was so obvious to me. It was my voice, and the words were mine, and the words were also the words of my King. And the words mean, you come home, we'll make a home together. If you want, I will marry you, and we will raise our son together. and nobody will touch a hair on his head. Because the context was the 90s, right? There was a lot of debate about pro-life, pro-choice. People were marching on the mall every weekend. I was marching with them every weekend. I loved that. One week I was pro-choice, the other week I was pro-life. So I had time to actually think about this, right? Right? I was marching every time I could. My 3 housemates was totally pro-choice. Valerie was a pagan. She had no religious education whatsoever. So I knew what her friends would say. Particularly, she had like a surrogate mother, an American mother. And I knew what the lady would say. And indeed, the lady said exactly what I anticipated that she would say. But that was not an option. So it was for me jumping off the cliff, giving my life away for my wife, for the one who was to become my wife, for my child. And that was it. But to give your life away like that in a split second, what a grace, what a grace. That's the high point of my life. And then it took 3 days for Valerie to come back from France. And I was so scared. I spent most of the 3 days sitting on the back pew of St. Matthew's Cathedral. I don't know if you know the place. There's a big church near Dupont Circle. And for 3 days I was there sitting in that pew, and I was scared. And there was a voice saying, Gauthier, what are you doing? You don't need to throw your life away. You have degrees from the best universities in Paris. You have the best job in the world. You have all this. You are going to go and study again at MIT and Harvard. What are you doing? Things like that happen all the time. You don't need to give your life away. And then it felt like that voice was trying to impose itself on me. It was almost like a dark presence next to me, smelling, ugly. But you know, through life you start to identify the different voices in your life, right? When the Lord speaks, it's a gentle voice. It's a voice that invites, right? Read the gospel. He says, would you do this? He never says, but the enemy tries to force itself onto you. And it was very clear to me during those 3 days, that voice that was trying to impose its will on me. And then Valerie came back, and within 2 weeks we had thrown a big engagement party, and then within 2 months we were married before a justice of peace. And then in January our son was born. And it was all wonderful. But I cannot get over how generous my King has been to us, beyond anything I could have imagined. How generous he has been to us. So it's not just one son. Valerie and I raised 7 children. Actually, she was pregnant 9 times. We lost 2 kids. But do you know many ladies who are that generous these days to be pregnant 9 times? Right? Not many. She's very, very special. And then I fell in love more than I could ever thought I would. It totally surprised me. And then something happened, which shows how generous God is. The first Easter that we spent together, right? Valerie was coming to church with me every Sunday. Well, she did not quite understand what was going on, but she knew it was important to me, so she trusted the process, and she came. And so the first Easter we spent at Holy Trinity Church. It's the parish church next to Georgetown University. A wonderful parish. And so on Thursday night for Holy Thursday, I spent most of the service outside the church because our son Thibaut had digestion issues. He was crying. So I was outside the church, he was inside the church. And then the office of the cross on Friday afternoon, I was outside the church, he was inside the church again. Thibaut had some difficulties again. And then Easter Vigil, right? It's the most beautiful liturgy of the whole year. 2 hours on Saturday night. Again, I was mostly outside the church, and Valerie was inside. And then Sunday, Easter Sunday in the morning, again, I was outside and she was inside. And you might say, she was a crazy lady, right? She's not a Christian. Spent all the hours in church. But when she came out of that church on Easter Sunday, She was a Christian. I don't know what happened in that church. I just know the pastor was very handsome, she told me. And a very good speaker. I don't know what happened. But by the time she came out of that church, she was a Christian. So after that, she could go through the process, be formally taught, be confirmed, First Communion, all that good stuff, right? But she was a Christian, and she never looked back. And her faith is rock solid. What a gift to our family. What a tremendous gift to our family. I grew up in a family that was always divided by the faith. It was like the French Revolution happened in my family. But what a gift that my wife received the faith. That was a tremendous gift. The Lord has been more generous than I could ever imagine. And all that generosity comes out of jumping with Him off the cliff. No more planning. Who knows? Who cares? Let's go. Now, still in this phase of life, active phase of life, that started this way. Now I am in my mid-30s. We are living in London. And I had a doctor appointment on a Friday morning. We had run some tests. I had a big lump under the armpit, which was cool because I walked like this as if I had a lot of muscles. And so I sit down with the doctor, and he says the word Hodgkin lymphoma. Hodgkin lymphoma. And I knew everything about Hodgkin lymphoma because my older brother had it when he was 18. And so we needed to do more tests, and I would learn later I was stage 3. So there was no time to waste. But I was very scared. I was very scared. I remember going back to my office. I canceled all the meetings for the afternoon, and I found refuge in a church. I always do. That's my place. So my office was on Trafalgar Square, and then behind, for those of you who know London, right, behind Trafalgar Square you have Leicester Square, with a lot of theaters, right? And then on the back of Leicester Square, you have a church. It's hard to see the entrance, the street and the church. It's the church that is used by the French Catholic community of London. So that's where I found refuge. And I sat on the last pew. And I was crushed. I was just scared for my wife, and at the time we had 5 little kids under 8. I was thinking, what's going to happen, right? And I was very scared. I was crushed. I could not pray. I could not think. I could not pray. I was just there. At some point, a priest came in, said Mass. I ignored the whole thing. I was just on my pew. And then after 2 or 3 hours, I heard these words. So not with my external ear, of course, right? But with the internal ear. The words rose in my consciousness. And the words say, I will be triumphant in their lives. It did not say I will be triumphant in your life. It did not say you are going to make it or you are not going to make it, right? I don't think the Lord is in the business of telling us what's going to happen in our lives. But He said that He would be triumphant in the life of my wife and the life of my 5 children. And that was it. I moved from being crushed to having a lot of life and energy in me. So I rushed out of the church, grabbed a taxi, went home, told Valerie what was going on, phoned my dad to ask for his prayers, and that was it. And then a wonderful experience. I would not want to miss it again. Right? For moms and moms and moms, when you go through treatment and every morning you wake up and you are weaker, and you feel the life is flowing out of you. But there's a great mystery there. Life is flowing out of you, but you are getting closer to your King. And I would not want to miss it. There's no price to that year, to spending that year with my Lord. And I remember walking down through Hampstead Heath, right? It's a big park, right? It's a beautiful park, right? So we lived on top of the park. So walking down the park, and then when you arrive at the south end, right, you see London, right? It's a little hill. There's a bench there, and I was dragging my feet, so I would stay there, looking over London, and then the the Hampstead Royal Hospital was right down there. So I said, okay, let's go. And you go down and you sit on your chair and you have all these sick people around you, and some are very frail and all that. But it's a wonderful experience of praying every day, every minute, especially when you have all that stuff flowing through you and you feel it, right? You are very close to your King, and it is a tremendous blessing. That's another way to pray. You learn to pray another way. You learn to pray with just by sitting there and trusting. You don't need words or thoughts, or you just stay there and you pray all the time, because he's always praying with you, always in a conversation. Then a few years later, my health was still shaky, and therefore employers did not think that it was a great deal, right? So at some point I was in between two jobs, and I had the tremendous opportunity to do something that has been on my mind for a long time. So on a January day, my wife and the 5 kids dropped me at a retreat place outside Boston. And I stayed there for 30 days in silence. Best month in my life. Imagine that. You spend 30 days in silence. It is absolutely wonderful, right? There's an old Jesuit priest there who had accepted to take me and guide me through what we call the exercises of Saint Ignatius. So imagine that, right? 5 times a day, you pray for an hour. And these are structured prayers, meditation, based on the gospel, right? You start with your watch. You say, okay, this hour, this 60 minutes, I'm staying with you, Lord. You start your prayer, you ask for the grace you want, what you want out of the prayer time, and then you read through your gospel passage. And you try to see it, you try to think through it, you use all your intellectual faculties first. You try to make sense out of it, project yourself in the scene, all that good stuff, right? And then you do what Ignatius called a colloquy. Then you leave everything on the side, you imagine that Jesus is sitting next to you, and you talk. And then when you are done with your hour, if you have a good time, you stop at the end of the 60 minutes. If you have a terrible time, you are bored to death, you go on to 60 plus 5 minutes. That's the way to do it. If you are bored, you add 5 minutes. If you have a good time, you stop. Because it's not your thing. And then you take a few notes. What happened during this hour of prayer? Consolations and desolations. This is the primary language of the Lord, right? Sometimes you hear words or thoughts. Most of the time, the way the Lord talks to you and me is through these movements of the heart. So you are with the Word, and as you are with the Word, or you walk outside in the snow, whatever it is, and the Spirit pulls at your heart. And you are in consolation when you feel more peace or joy, more life energy, more love, more faith, more hope. You are getting closer to the Lord. You work with the Spirit. Consolation. Desolation is the opposite movement. You feel unsettled. You feel dry. Something's not right. You feel lonely, tired. Desolation. And after a while, this becomes second nature, right? I can be speaking with you today. I'm going to feel in my heart whether I am in consolation, desolation. Am I going with the Spirit, with the flow of the Spirit? Consolation. Am I going against the Spirit? Desolation. You feel it all the time. That's God's primary language. And so you spend a month doing that. And on the outside, it looks like nothing's happening. On the inside, so much is happening. He talks so much. He talks all the time. He's pulling the strings of your heart all the time. He's moving you all the time. He's showing you what he wants you to see. He's saying what he wants you to hear. There's nothing better than that. And then by the end of these 30 days, he put a little crazy thought in the back of my mind. I thought it was crazy because it's a thought I had entertained several years earlier, and I had rejected it. I thought it didn't make any sense. And the thought was, why don't you become my deacon? And I thought, what the hell is that, right? Makes no sense. I understand the priest, I understand the lay people. Being a deacon's halfway through doesn't make any sense to me. But he put that thought in back of my mind. It was his. I could not deny it. So that's what we did. And then 6 years later, it was ordination day. It was June 7th, 2008. And I remember the mass with the ordination rite was going to start at 11, I think somewhere. I think it was in, was it in Darien somewhere, a big church? I don't even remember which church it was. But it was something like 11. And so I left home at 8. I like to be early. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I wanted to be just alone. And I remember I turned the engine on and I started crying. Just tears, for no reasons. The tears starting rolling down my cheeks for no reasons. And then I cried for 4 hours straight. No idea what was going on. Right? In the tradition, we talk about a gift of the Spirit. It was just joy. Just joy. Nothing else. No words. Sometimes the Lord, that's the best way the Lord speaks to you. No word. No thought. Just something like that. And so I cried for 4 hours. At some point, my younger brother showed up, and we prayed in the Catholic tradition, you have something called the office of the hours. That's the way monks pray, with a certain number of psalms. So you have an office in the morning, in the evening, whatever. I learned to pray that way when I was a kid from a friend of mine who was a former monk. And my younger brother separately learned that way of praying. So on that morning before ordination, he and I, what a joy, sat down on the grass with our prayer books, and we sang the Psalms. One verse, one verse, one verse, one verse. And then it was ordination. It was a beautiful ceremony, the Spirit moving, and everybody being touched in that church. Right? Like my father-in-law was there. My father-in-law was a pagan, right? He thought I was very strange. He thought his daughter should never have married a weird guy like me, right? But he was there in attendance, and he was touched by the Spirit like everybody else. And at the end, when everything was done, he came to me and said, "Gauthier, now I know that you love that you love my daughter." And I was thinking, who told you that? So we went home. I opened the best bottle of red Bordeaux that I had, and we drank, and it was a great time, right? But it was a gift, and ministry has been a tremendous gift. I have zero free time. I have had zero free time for the last 20 years, but a tremendous gift. I love proclaiming the word. I love preaching. I love doing spiritual direction. Spiritual direction, you sit with somebody and you just listen to what's happening in his or her life of prayer. And you probe, you ask questions, you guide a little bit. It's a tremendous ministry. I love that stuff. Or on Friday, I'm not here most Fridays because I do Bible study at Pivot Ministry. I love these men. I love them. Or youth group or men's group, whatever. But ministry has filled up all the free time I had. But it's it's a joy for me. I love every minute of it. One last word about this phase of life. The struggle to give your life away. So like all of you, I've worked pretty hard in the last 30 years, and work has been my great passion. And a lot of hours, right? And when you are young, you work 12, 14 hours a day, right? And you keep going, right? And on Saturday, you take a nap so that you can be refreshed, and off you go again, right? So great passion. But at the same time, always a great struggle for me. Because I always wanted work to be a prayer. I always felt if I spend that many hours at work, and if my mind is fully engaged solving a problem of finance or business, and my Lord is not there with me, I'm wasting my time. Or whether I'm wasting my time or not, I cannot survive. I need to be with my Lord all the time, otherwise I'm not going to survive. And so for all these years, it was a struggle for me to find how to make work a prayer. That was the challenge. I didn't want to have my life over here and be able to pray and have a good time, and then my life over there, and I was like a slave. I didn't want that. So it took me a long time to figure it out. But last time I came to NCS, I talked about that. There are 12 steps to make your life a prayer. In these 12 steps, my favorite step remains step number 9. You find a way to bring your heart back to the Lord all the time during the day. Every time you have an opportunity, you bring your heart, you reorient your heart towards the Lord. So many, many years ago, I learned the trick. My cheap little watch beeps every hour. And when my watch beeps, I can be in a meeting, I can be negotiating a deal, my mind is fully absorbed, or I'm trying to play games, right? And win. And my watch beeps. And without stopping the flow of the conversation or the flow of thinking, my heart opens up and I say, I love you. And every hour of the day or the night when my watch beeps, I turn to my Lord and I say, I love you. You love me, I love you. Or many of us, right, going through Grand Central every day. And you push through those doors and everybody's rushing out of Grand Central. And I got into the habit as I pushed those doors saying, Lord, take and receive. Take and receive. This is a prayer from Ignatius Loyola, one of my favorite saints. The whole prayer is, Lord, take and receive my liberty, my strength, my energy, all my talents. You gave them to me in the first place. I return them all to you. Dispose of them as you wish. Do whatever you want with them. I ask only one thing, your grace and your love. That's quite enough for me. I always love that prayer. I ask only one thing, your grace and your love. That's enough for me. And so every day going through the doors of Grand Central, take, Lord, and receive only your grace and your love. Whatever tricks you find, you reorient your life, your heart, you turn to the Lord all day long, and then work becomes a prayer. The third phase of life, Rolheiser calls that the struggle to give your death away. That's a very interesting title. The struggle to give your death away. That's this phase of life where you are less active. Every day you are a little weaker than the day before. You are confronted with death in many forms, with the process of dying in many forms. And you need to find a way to embrace dying in your life in a way that it becomes generative. It becomes life-giving. So embracing the process of dying in a way that gives life to others. That's the challenge of this third phase of life. And I find myself entering finally into that third phase of life. So the Lord and I have been talking about it quite a bit. It has been on my mind, on our mind for now 2 years. And so the first step for me is I'm going to resign from Deloitte. It's not official yet, so don't tell them. But I will make it official in June. And the other day, my second son, he's a banker with JP Morgan. He said, Dad, what are you doing? What are you doing? You are a senior partner in the largest and best professional services firm in the world. You are in your peak earning years. They're not going to kick you out before age 62. That's the rule. You are 58. You have 4 more years of making a lot of money. And you love your job. I love it. I have a great job. I have one of the best jobs in my company. And so my son, Christophe, says, what are you doing? What are you giving that up? And I just say, I feel compelled. But I could have said, the Lord and I have been talking about this quite a bit. And at some point we had a conversation about money. I said, Lord, this is the math. This is what I'm leaving on the table for the next 4 years. And this is surplus wealth because I have more than what I need. So my lifestyle is not going to change. I'm not going to take vacation. Nothing's going to change. This is all surplus money for your charities. So it has a lot of value. Do you want this? And the Lord said, I don't need another rich man. What do you want me to do with that? That's what he said. I think he meant, I can get as many rich people as I want to fund my charities. Thank you very much. I don't need another rich man. And another day I was praying with John 23 when Jesus turns to Peter and said, you must follow me. And at some point I prayed with that text and it was Jesus saying, you must follow me. So this is what I'm going to do. So I don't know what this phase of life is going to look like. All right? I think there will be more time for silent prayer. Silent prayer has been a gift in my life. That's the way I start every day. I love all forms of prayer, and there are many ways to pray. But many years ago, I learned from an old monk silent prayer. I thought, so I'm allowed to pray that way. So every day I start with half hour. I sit down in my prayer armchair, and I do nothing. I don't read anything, try to ignore my thoughts, ignore my feelings. No, you pray with a deeper level in you, right? You have the intellect, you have the affect, and all this is good. You pray with this, you can pray with the affect, where we sing songs, all of that, and you pray with a deeper level in you, with your will. I love you, you love me. I love that silence. And when nothing happens, it's even better. So there will be more time for that. More time for church, more time for ministry, spiritual direction, more time to guide other people through the exercises of Ignatius, which is such a gift. More time with my wife. The relationship with my wife in the last 2 years have been a little strained. I think we have been just too busy for 30 years, not enough time for each other. And now she's the one who is sick. She's the one who has to go to the hospital every week, sit in that stupid chair, get things plugged into her, and enjoy the ride. And I see she's tired, she's scared. So I don't know where this is taking us. I hope for many years where we can go and ski in the French Alps together, when we can host our children for long summer vacations, where we can play with the grandchildren. I have all these ideas about this last phase of life. Who knows what will happen? Who knows? But if I leave you with one image, it will be this. This is, for me, what this phase of life, to give your death away, means. Years ago, I came across a prayer by a gentleman. His name is Pedro Arrupe. Pedro Arrupe was the general of the Jesuits in the 60s and 70s. And this gentleman had a wonderful life, right? By the way, he was in Nagasaki, Japan, when the bomb fell. So he saw the bomb, he rushed downtown to help people, right? That was the kind of man. He was a young Jesuit priest at the time. And then he became the head of the Jesuits in the 60s, 70s, so the church, where a lot was happening. So the guy was super active. He was always flying around, visiting communities. Whenever the Vatican had some initiative, he was part of it. Super active life. Holy life. Great. And then he got a stroke. And overnight, this gentleman moved from a life of hyperactivity to being bedridden. And he could hardly communicate. And then he wrote this prayer. And the prayer says, I read this 30 years ago, but I never forgot it. And it's only now that it's making sense to me. Pedro Arrupe said, well, now I see all initiative is with you, my God. Of course, the guy is bedridden, right? He cannot even lift an arm. I see all initiative is with you, my God. And this is what I have desired ever since I was a little boy. That's what he said. And now that I'm entering into that third phase of life, I realize that every day the initiative will be a little more his and a little less mine. And I realize that this is what I have desired ever since I was a little boy learning to pray at night. To let him do whatever he has to do. All initiative is his. This is what I have desired ever since I was a little boy, and it is coming. Thank you.